Hey you guys! Oh my god, it's so good to see you! I am so happy to be here. I am in a great mood today and it's kind of dreary, but I'm using natural light, so hopefully it looks okay. But I cannot wait to talk about the family with you guys. I have so many like places that I marked. As I was reading it. Oh, hey, Rachel. Okay, good. So the stream is working. Last month, I had major technical difficulties, so my sister double checked for me. So I really appreciate that, Rachel. So far, so good. And I will give everyone a minute or two to join, and we will dive into this book, which honestly ripped my heart out, and I was so surprised at how emotional this book made me, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys think about it and thought about it as you were reading as well. And then, of course, at the end, I am going to announce our December book club pick, which I am just so excited for. I think that this book that we'll read in December is going to be one of the best that we read this year, and it's going to be like turned into a limited series as well, so stay tuned for that at the end. But I would love, as you're joining, if you read The Family, to let us know in the chat what you thought about it. Your like, were you immediately captivated by it? Did it like take a while for you to get into it? Was the story what you were expecting? Because for me, I didn't expect this book to literally follow the two main characters, Antonia and Sophia, throughout like their entire lives, through like until their adulthood. I just did not expect that from what I had just barely known about the book, because I like to go into books knowing as little as possible. I just find that to be more interesting to me, and then I don't have any like preconceived notions. So going into it, I just didn't know that it would follow them from like their very young childhood through their like adulthood. And I feel like I was pretty quickly captivated by the story, but the author's writing style was really different from other books that I have read. And for me, it was more of like, once I got, I would say like a little less than halfway, the author's writing style became like this like steady heartbeat or something. Like it was just so rhythmic to me and very like soothing in a way. Like I just loved reading the way that she wrote, and I'm pretty sure this is her debut novel. Yeah, this was her first novel. So I am curious to see what else this author Naomi Krupitsky writes, because this isn't like, I would say this isn't my typical genre. Like this was more of historical fiction, and not that I don't read historical fiction, but I'm more like modern fiction, or just like not set in particular time periods. So this was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I really enjoyed it. And yeah, once I got to that like midway point, I just couldn't put it down. I was so hooked, and I think it was last Sunday. I just like blew through half of the book. Like I was just in love with it, and it really did like make me extremely emotional. It was so much more than the plot. Like the plot of what happens with the family and how Sophia and Antonia are like intertwined with this, like, I don't know if it's like the mafia or the mob. Like I don't know if those are interchangeable words, because they never said exactly what it was, which I think is so like realistic with this type of like business. Like you never really talk about what it is, you know? So that was like very, I would say, true to life. And So anyway, seeing them, like, being so involved in that type of world, I thought that would be mostly what goes on in this book, and of course, that's what, like, led the plot forward, and what ultimately happened at the end was because of the situation that they're in with the family with the capital F. Um, but what really just, like, made me so emotional was their friendship and how difficult it is as you're growing up and as you're, like, changing as a person, and, like, seeing their friendship go from, like, being basically the only people each other knows to going into school and realizing, like, they're not really welcome there because of who their family is, and, like, the business side of what their family does. That was interesting, and then seeing them growing up as, like, teenagers and having them kind of grow apart and not know how each other fits into, like, one another's lives. That was so, like, real. Like, that's, I feel like, the best way I can describe this. Like, their relationship and the way that they grew up into women and with their, like, partners and with their children, it was just so real and so raw, and it was just, like, hard to read sometimes, and I love that about it because it felt like you were really looking into someone's life and really looking into their, like, mind and their, like, heart, and it was hard to read, but beautiful, and just, like, oh, it just devastated me in the best possible way, like, especially when, Antonia had postpartum depression, and, like, she was really, really struggling through that, and then Sophia not knowing how to kind of grapple with her best friend, like, not really being present, and, like, just going through something so impossible, and just, like, their love for each other, I don't know, it was so emotional to me, like, I absolutely loved it. And hey, Jamie, oh my gosh, yay, booster shot. I was waiting until, like, all the craziness at my work is over, but in a few weeks, I'm gonna get it, and I'm so excited. So, thanks so much for being here, and let me know what you thought of this book. We are just getting started, and, yeah, so I found this book to be a lot more emotional than I expected it to be, and I'm not sure if everyone felt that way, but for me, it was so much more than the plot. And the plot was interesting. It kept me, like, kept the story moving, kept me interested. The ending was like, I did not see that coming. With, like, who actually pulled the trigger, would not have guessed that. Um, and we'll get there in a second, but I would love to know, like, between our main characters, Sophia and Antonia, if there was one you particularly, like, related to or gravitated to, or if you just found them both interesting, or any thoughts you have on that, because I thought both had, like, they were so different. They were like two sides of a coin. Like, they balanced each other, but they were so different yet very similar, like, with their core values and what their life is about. And Sophia, I feel like, was just so feisty. Like, that was the word I kept coming back to when reflecting on her character. Like, from a young age, she, like, would stand up for what she believed in, even if it wasn't, like, she was just taking what she thought as, like, the 100% truth, but there's obviously nuance to it. And one part that I wrote down that I really, really liked was when Sophia and Antonia got into, like, just a, like, argument discussion about, like, the family with a capital F. Like, Sophia was basically so angry, and this was, I think, when she was a teenager, about, like, that the family disappeared her, Carlo, which is Antonio's dad, um, And like Sophia was like, how can you say that this is all complex? Like they took your dad from you. Like basically Sophia was just like, how can you not be upset and how can you just like go along with what the family does? And Antonia is like, they pay for our bills, like they pay for our house. We can't really get away from them. Like even though they did something so horrible to her family, like she knows it's more complex than that at such a young age. And so I thought that was one of the most interesting parts of the book, where they were just like the two girls were talking about what happened at the beginning of the story, and it was like one of the only times they really talked about Carlo's disappearance. And obviously that was like the first main thing that happened in this book, and like it led Antonia's mom, Lena, to just be destroyed essentially. Like she, until like much later in the book, she didn't even have a life, I would say. Like she was just a shell of herself, but she knew that she couldn't survive without the family with a capital F. And that I thought was a really interesting aspect of this book, that like the group that did the worst possible thing to their family was also a group that they like couldn't be disconnected from. Like they needed them. And then of course Antonia marries someone in the family, which was exactly what Lena didn't want her to do, because she knew that it would just lead to a life of pain and potentially death. And it was really a lot more interesting than I thought it would be, to be honest, about like that type of life. And yeah, so to me, I found Antonia much more interesting as a character. Like Sophia was super like kind of wild and had that really strong big personality, which I thought it was so cool when she started like snooping in her husband's like notes and then decided she wanted a job with the family. And that's when I found her to be more of an interesting character. But just like overall, Antonia was a much more, I guess, like complex and nuanced character to me. And I liked both of them. But of course, them together, like that's where the magic happens, you know? Like they're just like sisters basically. So I thought that was cool. Um, and let's see what else. Just talking about like family, like your family, like your parents, your siblings, things like that, versus like the family with a capital F. Um, there was like book of the month sends me like a little stack of cards with like questions on it that I can use like for our discussion. And a lot of times I don't, but one of the questions that they had that I thought was really interesting was like, is family, like not capital F, and the family with a capital F, like, are there differences or is it the same? Because in the traditional sense of like family, your parents, your siblings, stuff like that, um, in this world for these characters, their family is the family with a capital F. Like even if they don't know all of them or they don't agree with what they do, like because especially once Sophia's dad became like the secondhand man, I would say her family and the family are the same. And it was especially blurred, like I think for Antonia, because of what they had done to her father and that there was no like justice there. And like it was just horrible. Like they didn't even get to say goodbye to him. Like they didn't even have like his body. Like it was just horrible. But like I think when I read that question, I was like, oh yeah, their family and the family are different. But when I really started thinking about it, they're so intertwined for these women that the family is their family. Like, you can't really separate the family from their family because it's so hard, like, just saying the family a million times. But, like, it's just they are the family, you know? Like, both of their husbands worked for, them, and then Sophia, her dad, was, like, one of the main people. So, that was, I think, an interesting thing to, like, reflect on, because of the terminology of, like, their group being the family. Like, yeah, you would do anything for them, but you also, like, if they want to leave the family, you can't. Like, and that is, like, in a sense, similar to, like, a traditional family. Not that hopefully they would kill you, but it is hard to, like, distance yourself from your family, um, and the family would kill you. So, kind of interesting to think about those, like, similarities and differences. And, um, like, I definitely was pretty surprised that both women married people from the family, like, people that were employed by, Joey or Tommy Fianzo or whatever. Um, like, that I thought was really interesting, that just because of their proximity to, like, the men that they had basically available to them were all people that worked for, the family. And I feel like Sophia, that was pretty, it would have happened no matter what. But then for Antonia, I thought that was interesting, that despite what happened to her dad, despite what her mom, like, wanted for her to, like, get distance from the family, she still ended up marrying someone that worked for them. And, oh, that is such a great way to put it, Jamie. The family is always there, inescapable. You don't get to fly under the radar. Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, when, and this wasn't really flying under the radar, but when Sophia got pregnant and they were telling her parents at, like, just more of a private dinner, thank God. And then Saul went home and her dad, like, assaulted him. Like, he, like, pressed him up against the wall and, like, hit his head. Like, oh my God, that was insane. And I feel like it was part, like, he's protective of his daughter, but also, like, our family is so, like just in the public eye. Like, even if it's not really the public, it's like they're a very prominent family, and he, like, coming from his background, not being, like, Italian or whatever, like, that was so interesting to me that he was, like, threatening Saul, when it was like, well, what's he supposed to do? Like, he already got her pregnant, so oh my God, that scene, I was, like, terrified. And then I couldn't believe that the same guy, Saul, who I found that, like, the partners of each of the women were very interesting. Like, they, I was sad about Paolo, like, being so, like, depressed and just, like, negative, and um just didn't know how to get out of that. But Saul being with, like, the feisty Sophia, I could not believe that he actually took a job as, like, a double agent. I was like, your father-in-law is literally the leader of this group, and you are going to, like, sneak around behind his back. Like, there's no way this is gonna end well. And shockingly, Saul wasn't, like, murdered in cold blood by Joey, but I feel like that is very possible. And in one review that I read, someone, like, said that this book seems like the first of a series, and I don't know if this is meant to be a series, but I could see it, like, because it was not necessarily a cliffhanger, but, like, the ending had a lot of action that, like, you wanna know the repercussions of it. So, I would love to also see what happens between Saul and Joey because I can't imagine him continuing to get away with it. Like, I know Paolo, like, beat him up or whatever, but, I mean, I feel like Joey's gonna kill him, so I think that would be interesting to see what else happens, and, um, obviously, in the end, Sophia is, like, working for her dad as, like, a I don't even know what you would call it, like, she's, like, trying to get information and trying to, calm down these people that are getting on the bad side of the family, and so she, like, goes rogue and is like knows that her husband is being this double agent and is trying to like work things out. And then Antonia just being like connected to Sophia or whatever. Like it almost reminded me of like twins, like where it's like you can just if your twin is having like a bad day or whatever, like that's how it kind of ended up being for Sophia and Antonia. And that whole ending was just like so chaotic and insane with like Antonia and Paolo going to Joey's house and being like, we need to get Sophia, and he's like, no, 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 and then she just runs after like to go to the docks, and her husband just follows her which was like kind of funny to me, like he didn't know what to do at all, and she was just like she had a mission, and I was absolutely so shocked that like the very first pages or whatever where it's talking about like the gun, and once you like pull the trigger of the gun, like leading up to it you're like really like thinking and like all these thoughts flash behind like in your mind, but once you pull it it's like serenity or whatever. I definitely figured that that was Sophia pulling the trigger, but in the end we find out that it was Antonia, and she was like saving Sophia from Tommy Fianzo Jr., and that she kills him. Don't know how she got so good at shooting a gun where just one shot just killed him like right off the bat, but oh well. And then Sophia, and their husbands are going to like cover it up and make it look like it was an accident or something. So I would definitely be curious if it was to be a sequel, like if there was a sequel that comes out for this. That would be really interesting to see like what are the repercussions of that, because it is like okay, there was like a lot of buildup, and to me the book was most interesting when it was about like Antonia and Sophia's inner struggles, and just like feeling like if Antonia was like really feeling positively about like her pregnancy or whatever, and then Sophia would be like, I feel like a horrible like mother because I'm not like super excited and stuff. Like I found that to be the most interesting parts of the book. So I felt very satisfied by that, and the plot was just kind of like additive to me. So I would be interesting to see what else happens if there was a sequel. But for me, it was just like this perfect like slice of life story where it was like 20 years of these women's lives or 25 years or something, and like condense all of the like minor stuff and just focus on those really really um huge moments like that were impactful for their friendship, for like them as individuals, like Antonia always wanting to go to college but having just so many other things fall into place that she always was like, I wanted to do that and now like I can't do it. And that type of stuff was the most interesting to me out of this book, and I just thought that it was like so raw and so real, and this author really captured like true human emotions, I thought, extremely well. So yeah. Oh, seeing Antonia and Sophia's kids growing up in the family like this story began. Yes. Oh my god, that would be so good, because like we got a few little hints at like their kids, which I don't remember their names right now, but like just noticing like Sophia wasn't really around, or like they could just like, kids obviously can perceive things even if they don't fully understand them. So just having those few little like moments in the book where it was through their perspectives, I thought that was really good. So I agree. If there's like a second book, I would love to see that perspective. But that is kind of everything I wanted to say about the family. And I was honestly shocked how much I liked this book. And yeah, so I would say home run for me. And I'll definitely keep you guys posted if I hear there's a sequel. But without further ado, let's talk about our December book club pick, because I think this is going to be amazing. I'm so stoked about this, and I'm happy that I had to do this live stream a few days early, because hopefully then you guys can get the book earlier in the month and all that good stuff. So for December, we are going to read A Flickr in the Dark by Stacy Willingham. And this is a thriller, super up my alley. I think up most of your alleys as well. And this book is going to be turned into a limited series starring Emma Stone. So it's going to be a hot book. Like, this book is going to be everywhere. So a short synopsis is: when Chloe Davis was 12, 6 teenage girls went missing in her small Louisiana town. By the end of the summer, Chloe's father had been arrested as a serial killer and promptly put in prison. Now, 20 years later, Chloe is a psychologist in Baton Rouge and getting ready for her wedding. And then a local teenage girl goes missing, and then another, and that terrifying summer comes crashing back. Is she paranoid and seeing parallels that aren't really there? Or for the second time in her life, is she about to unmask a killer? Oh, I'm so excited. It sounds perfect. I just cannot wait to read this. And I think we are going to have a really fun December reading that, and then we will discuss it at either the end of December or beginning of January. It's so hard with the holidays to know a good time to meet, but I think it's going to be a good one, and a good one to take on a vacation, or if you're just doing a staycation or have a little time off with the holidays. I think we are all going to really like this book. So A Flickr in the Dark by Stacy Willingham is our December book pick, and I can't wait to read it with you guys. And yeah, so I hope you all have a really awesome rest of your weekend, and I hope you had a great Thanksgiving if you celebrate it. And that's about it for today. So thanks again for joining. Thanks so much, Jamie, and I hope you feel okay after your booster. And yeah, so thanks everyone, and I'll see you soon. Bye.